Today we will be looking at two horrifying caving stories that went horribly wrong. As always, viewer discretion is advised. March 5th, 2005 started like any other day at Devil's Den Cave. The sun was bright, the air was crisp, and deep beneath the Earth's surface, something absolutely horrifying was about to unfold. The man had entered Devil's Den Cave earlier that morning, equipped with his headlamp, helmet, and the confidence that comes from experience. He had explored underground systems before. He knew the risks. He understood that subterranean passages could be tight, disorienting, and dangerous. But knowledge and preparation can only protect you so far when you're dealing with the raw, unforgiving geometry of solid rock. He had been making his way through the system for hours, navigating familiar passages and exploring new routes. Devil's Den was a maze of tunnels, some large enough to walk through upright, others requiring him to crouch, crawl, or squeeze through on his belly. Each passage presented its own challenge, its own unique architecture carved by millions of years of water erosion through the limestone. The temperature underground remained constant, cool and damp. Water dripped from stalactites overhead, the sound echoing through chambers in an irregular rhythm that was both peaceful and unsettling. His breath came in steady puffs of condensation in the beam of his headlamp. Everything was going according to plan. Then he found it. A passage he hadn't fully explored before. It looked manageable at the entrance, maybe 2 feet high and 3 feet wide. His headlamp beam disappeared into the darkness ahead, unable to illuminate where the tunnel led. The opening seemed to promise continuation, perhaps opening into a larger chamber beyond. This was the moment where he should have turned back. This was the moment where instinct should have overridden curiosity. But he didn't turn back. He lowered himself onto his stomach and began to crawl forward, using his elbows and knees to propel himself through the narrow passage. The rock pressed against his back and chest, limiting his breathing to shallow gasps. This was normal. This was expected. Underground, you learn to control your breathing, to fight the panic that came from being enclosed by millions of tons of stone pressing down from above. The tunnel continued straight for maybe 15 feet. The walls seemed to tighten slightly, but nothing he couldn't handle. His headlamp scraped against the ceiling, sending small cascades of dust and tiny rock fragments into his eyes. He blinked them away and kept moving forward. Forward was the only option now. The passage was too narrow to turn around. Then the tunnel changed. The passage took a sharp turn. Not a gentle curve, but an abrupt 90-degree angle. An L shape carved into the bedrock, dropping down vertically and twisting to the right. He paused at the intersection, shining his light into the vertical shaft. It looked tight, desperately tight, but he convinced himself it was passable. This is where everything went catastrophically wrong. He committed to the turn. He pushed his head and shoulders into the vertical section, his upper body flat against the stone floor. To navigate the L-shaped passage, he would need to twist his entire body through the intersection. His torso began to rotate as he forced himself deeper into the angular tunnel. His chest made it through. His stomach pressed against the corner where the passage turned. And then he felt it, the resistance. The terrible realization that the geometry of the tunnel didn't match the geometry of his body. He tried to pull himself forward. His legs, still in the horizontal section of the passage, pointed upward and backward. His torso, now committed to the vertical shaft, face downward. At the intersection, at his waist, his body was twisted 90 degrees. His spine was torqued at an angle no human spine should ever experience. He was simultaneously lying flat on his stomach and standing on his knees, his body bent in a way that defied natural human positioning, and he couldn't move. Not forward, not backward. His body was locked in the L-shaped prison of stone, twisted like a corkscrew at the corner intersection. Every attempt to push forward only wedged him tighter. Every attempt to pull backward was impossible because his legs had no leverage in their upward-pointing position. The rock held him like a vice, unyielding and absolute. Panic set in immediately. His breathing became rapid and shallow, which only made things worse in the confined space. Each breath required his ribs to expand against solid rock. His heart hammered in his chest. The headlamp beam shook as his head trembled, casting wild shadows in the impossibly tight passage. He tried to calm himself. He tried to think logically, but logic offered no solutions. He was stuck in a position that seemed physically impossible to escape from. His body was twisted in a configuration that prevented any normal movement. He couldn't reach his arms back to push against anything. His legs couldn't find purchase to pull himself backward. The corner of the L-shaped passage had become a trap more effective than any mechanism designed by human hands. Time became meaningless. Minutes felt like hours. His muscles began to ache from the unnatural position. His twisted torso made breathing increasingly difficult. The weight of the earth above him seemed to grow heavier with each passing moment, as if the cave itself was slowly crushing him deeper into its stone embrace. He was alone, deep underground, trapped in a position so absurd, so geometrically improbable, that even if he could scream for help, he wasn't sure anyone would believe his predicament. Above ground, someone had noticed his vehicle in the parking area. Hours had passed since anyone had seen him. Park rangers were alerted. They knew someone was underground. They knew Devil's Den Cave. And they knew that tight passages in that system could be unforgiving. The rangers entered the cave system, moving quickly but carefully through the passages. They called out, their voices echoing through the chambers. Somewhere deep in the system, the trapped man heard those distant calls. Hope surged through him, giving him renewed energy to try to signal his position. The rangers followed the most likely route based on their knowledge of the cave. They squeezed through passage after passage, their own headlamps cutting through the darkness. Then, one of them spotted it. The narrow horizontal tunnel. The one that seemed to lead nowhere. The ranger approached and peered inside. His light revealed the impossible sight. A pair of legs, knees bent, pointing upward in the horizontal passage. And somewhere beyond, in the vertical shaft, the rest of the man's body, twisted and trapped. The cave rescue team had been called, specialists trained for exactly this kind of nightmare scenario. But the rangers knew time was critical. The man's breathing was labored. His body was twisted in a position that could cause serious injury. They had to act immediately. What followed was a delicate, agonizing process. The rangers couldn't simply pull him out. His body was wedged and twisted in a way that required careful manipulation. They had to work in the confined space themselves, reaching in to assess exactly how he was positioned. They began to work on freeing his legs first, trying to give them room to maneuver. Inch by inch, they manipulated his lower body, trying to untwist the terrible corkscrew configuration that held him. The man endured waves of pain as his body was shifted and adjusted in the tight confines. The rangers worked with incredible patience and skill. They understood the cave's geometry. They understood human anatomy, and somehow, through a combination of technique, determination, and perhaps sheer luck, they found the exact sequence of movements needed to reverse his entry into the trap. Slowly, agonizingly, they began to extract him. His legs were straightened, his torso was untwisted. His body was carefully pulled backward through the L-shaped passage, reversing the nightmare journey that had imprisoned him. When they finally pulled him free from the narrow passage and into a larger chamber, he could barely process what had happened. His body ached. His muscles trembled from hours of tension and unnatural positioning. But he was free. The rangers helped him through the cave system and back to the surface. By the time the specialized cave rescue team arrived, ready for a complex extraction operation, the man was already out. The rangers had accomplished what seemed impossible. March 5th, 2005, ended very differently than it had begun. The man who entered Devil's Den Cave that morning had learned a terrible lesson about the unforgiving nature of stone, about the limits of human body mechanics, and about how quickly exploration can turn into entrapment. The official report would be brief. A man became stuck in a tight passage. Park rangers freed him before the rescue team arrived. No other details necessary. But those who were there, who saw the impossible position he was trapped in, who witnessed the delicate extraction from the L-shaped nightmare, they knew the truth. They knew how close it had come to being a very different kind of story. The kind that ends not with rescue, but with recovery. Devil's Den Cave remains open to exploration. The L-shaped passage is still there, waiting in the darkness. A geometric trap carved by nature, indifferent to human suffering, patient as only stone can be. Memorial Day weekend, August 2005. A team of experienced surveyors prepared for an ambitious mapping expedition into a recently discovered cave system. The cave was significant. Extensive passages that required documentation, chambers that needed measuring, routes that demanded careful survey work to create accurate maps for future explorers. The team planned a lengthy underground trip, knowing they would spend many hours in the cave completing their survey objectives. The weather that weekend was unstable. Rain fell intermittently across the region, sometimes in brief showers, sometimes in more sustained downpours. But the surveyors had a job to do, maps to create, passages to document. They entered the cave at approximately 12:30 p.m., beginning their descent into Columbia Canyon, a large lower-level trunk passage that served as the highway to their survey area deep in the system. The trek to the far end of Columbia Canyon took 3 hours. This was serious cave travel, not a casual stroll through tourist-friendly passages. The surveyors moved through chambers and passages, descended vertical drops, navigated obstacles, and covered significant distance into the cave's interior. By the time they reached their survey area, they were deep underground, far from the entrance, committed to hours of work before beginning the long return journey. The team split into 2 groups to maximize efficiency. Cave surveying is methodical work, measuring distances with tape, recording compass bearings, noting passage dimensions, documenting features. Each survey station must be precisely located and recorded. The work proceeds slowly, but creates the detailed maps that allow future explorers to understand the cave's 3-dimensional structure. At one point, one survey team worked through a large room with a distinctive feature. The floor was covered with mud hills rising 20 to 30 feet, 6 to 9 meters high. These mud formations created a surreal landscape, transformed the room into something resembling Badlands, or desert terrain transplanted underground. The team noted that the mud was very slick, apparently from recent flooding. Water had been through this room not long ago, saturating the mud, making the surfaces treacherous. As they completed their survey of the mud hill room, the team discovered something concerning. One of their earlier survey points, located close to a pool of water, was now underwater. The water level had risen since they had placed that survey station. Water was entering the cave system and accumulating. The surveyors continued their work until approximately 1:30 a.m., 13 hours after entering the cave. They had accomplished their survey objectives, documented new passages, extended the known map of the cave system. Now it was time to exit. They packed their equipment, organized their survey notes, and began the long trek back toward the entrance. The return journey followed the same route they had used coming in, retracing their path through Columbia Canyon toward the entrance. As they approached the bottom of a vertical section called the Puppet Buster Drop, they encountered an unexpected obstacle that stopped them completely. Water had filled the passage at the base of the Puppet Buster. Where there had been dry or damp passage on their way in, there was now a pool approximately 100 feet, 30 meters long, and 15 to 20 feet, 4.6 to 6 meters, deep. The passage was completely flooded. There was no way around the water. The pool filled the passage from wall to wall. There was no alternative route up the pit. The Puppet Buster was the only way out of this section of the cave. The surveyors assessed their situation. They were weighted down with vertical gear, Ropes, harnesses, ascending devices, helmets with mounted lights, battery packs. They carried survey equipment, personal gear, water bottles, everything needed for a 13-hour underground expedition. Swimming 100 feet while burdened with all this equipment was not just difficult, it was potentially fatal. The weight could drag them under, the equipment could entangle, exhaustion could set in before reaching the far side. Pete Pencer decided to attempt the crossing. He emptied his pack of everything except essentials, reducing weight as much as possible while still maintaining critical equipment. He entered the water and began swimming toward the rope hanging at the far end of the pool, marking the base of the Puppet Buster climb. He made it approximately 10 feet, 3 meters, before the reality of the situation became clear. The weight of his remaining gear, the drag of his clothing, the physical exertion of swimming in cave water, all of it combined to make forward progress nearly impossible. He struggled to stay afloat, fighting to keep his head above water, burning energy at an unsustainable rate. He turned back before exhaustion or submersion made return impossible. The team brainstormed solutions. They needed flotation, something to help support Pencer's weight in the water and allow him to cross the 100-foot pool without drowning. In a moment of creative problem solving, they hit upon an idea. They emptied Pencer's pack completely and filled it with empty water bottles, plastic containers that had held their drinking water during the survey work. The air-filled bottles created a makeshift flotation device. Pencer entered the water again, this time with his pack full of empty water bottles providing buoyancy. The improvised flotation device worked. He was able to swim and float across the pool, making steady progress toward the far side. The 100-foot crossing that had seemed impossible with his weighted gear became manageable with the aid of the water bottle flotation. He reached the rope at the far end of the pool, grabbed it, and pulled himself out of the water. His companions watched from the near side of the pool as Pencer began climbing the Puppet Buster. He was heading out of the cave to get help. The remaining surveyors settled down to wait at the edge of the pool, knowing they would be stuck there for hours while Pencer made the long journey to the surface and organized a rescue party. Pencer climbed the Puppet Buster and continued toward the entrance, retracing the 3-hour route through Columbia Canyon alone. He reached the surface at approximately 9:45 a.m., nearly 21 hours after the team had originally entered the cave. He made his way to the field house where other surveyors were staying, a nearby location where the caving community gathered during expeditions to this area. Pencer reported the situation. A survey team was trapped at the bottom of the Puppet Buster by a flooded passage approximately 100 feet long and 15 to 20 feet deep. They needed flotation assistance to cross. They had been underground for 21 hours and would need food and dry clothing after spending hours sitting at the edge of a pool in the constant cool temperature of the cave environment. A rescue party was quickly assembled. Experienced cave rescuers gathered an air mattress for flotation, food to replenish the stranded surveyors' energy, and extra clothing since the trap team had likely become cold during their extended wait. Shortly after 11 a.m., the rescue group entered the cave carrying their supplies and equipment. The journey to the Puppet Buster took time. This was not a quick dash to a nearby location, but a deliberate movement through extensive cave passages to reach the stranded team deep in the system. After 6 hours spent waiting at the edge of the pool, the trap surveyors finally heard sounds echoing through the passages. Their friends were approaching. Rescue was arriving. A wetsuit-wearing member of the rescue team entered the flooded passage. The wetsuit provided thermal protection in the cold cave water and some buoyancy assistance. The rescuer swam across the pool, trailing a rope and carrying the air mattress. Once across, the rope was secured, creating a fixed line that stretched across the 100-foot flooded section. The stranded surveyors were pulled across the pool one by one, using the air mattress for flotation and the rope for guidance and support. Each person made the crossing that had seemed impossible hours earlier, now achievable with proper flotation and a secured rope. As each surveyor reached the far side, they climbed out of the water, cold and exhausted, but safe. Food and dry clothes were distributed. The surveyors changed out of their wet garments, ate to restore energy depleted by hours of waiting in the cold cave environment, and prepared for the final push to the surface. The entire group began making their way out through Columbia Canyon toward the entrance. The last members of the group reached the surface at approximately 7:15 p.m. They had been underground for 33 hours, from 12:30 p.m. the previous day through 7:15 p.m. the following evening. What had been planned as a lengthy but manageable survey trip had become an extended ordeal due to flooding that blocked their primary exit route. The post-incident analysis revealed the factors that had created the dangerous situation. It had been a rainy weekend with cloud bursts dropping as much as 2 inches, 5 centimeters of rain in an hour. Total rainfall in the area reached approximately 6 inches, 15 centimeters, a substantial amount of water that had to go somewhere. In karst terrain, surface water drains rapidly into limestone cave systems. The caves serve as natural storm drains, channeling rainwater underground through passages and shafts. The survey team had entered a recently discovered cave during a rainy weekend and had been trapped by flooding for 6 hours, requiring rescue assistance to extract them after 33 hours underground. They had survived only through a combination of skill, creativity, and the rapid response of experienced cave rescuers.